welcome back to my channel. Just Shauna here to talk about some friggin' book stats. So, it is technically, what is the date today? The 28th of December. So the year is not officially over, and I will have some time later on today for reading, and tomorrow pretty much all day for reading. But am I going to read all day tomorrow? Probably not. So even if I start a book later on, there are two that I do want to start, and I might get them done by tomorrow. It just depends on how it goes. The books in question are Children of Virtue and Vengeance by Tomi Adeyemi. Can't wait. I really want to start it. And then also Queen of the Conquered by Kacen Callender. That's from the library, so I do want to start that. So I might start both of them and just see how it goes, but I'm highly doubting that I will finish either by the 31st. At any rate, even if I do, that'll only be probably one book to add to these stats, and it won't really matter all that much. The first statistic I am going to go over is the number of books I read for each month. I do not typically do monthly wrap-ups. If I do any kind of monthly wrap-up, it's just like a readathon that was the entire month wrap-up, and it just happens to be monthly. So, the number of books that I read each month. Ba-bam, here we go. January 7, February 10, March 4, April 6, my eyes are really bad right now, May 2, June 5, July 13, what is it called this year? Booktubeathon, but fuck, I can't remember what they renamed it this year. You guys know what I'm talking about. August 6, September 9, October 12, November 7, and December 13, and that is because of Reindeerathon. So yeah, July and December were my best for sure, but then February and October were close seconds, I would say. And then let's have a look at my ratings throughout the year. Oh, for most of these, I'm gonna do comparisons, by the way, from 2018 to 2019, or 2019 to 2018, whatever. So for 2019, here is the pie chart for my ratings. Definitely mostly 3-star, 24% 3-star. And if we compare this though to last year 3-star was definitely my highest, but I did have more 4-stars. But I definitely had less 5 stars and slightly less 4.5 stars, and then also less DNFs. And this year I had more 3.5 stars. Also, this year I added in the 2.5 star. So honestly, last year, a lot of those 3 stars, probably they would have fit into my new 2.5 star. So there's that also. So this one I don't have the 2018 comparison, but I can tell you it's very similar. The genre of books read, it's like 50% fantasy, adult or young adult, but just fantasy in general. Definitely read more historical fiction this year. I know that for a fact. Not a lot, but more than I did last year. So the age range for 2019, heavily young adult, and compared with last year, I read more middle grade last year than I did this year, and I think that was because of Harry Potter probably, and the series of unfortunate events. I mean, my young adult to adult range isn't super different from last year. I anticipate in 2020 that I'm gonna end up having a lot more adult books. Towards the end of 2019, I've just found, I don't know if it's just the books I was picking up that were young adult, but quite a few of them, not all of them, but there were quite a few that I picked up that I was really excited for and really interested in. And then DNF'd quite a few, just wasn't into it, and I was kind of craving something, I don't know how to say it, because I don't want to say more complex, because I think young adult books can be very complex, but just the reading level, you know what I mean? Obviously, it's a little higher in adult books, and that makes sense because they're geared for grown-ass people, and young adult is supposed to be geared towards teenagers. You know, different reading levels. Not that teenagers can't read adult. I did when I was a teenager. But you know what I'm saying. The target audience, the writing style is definitely different. And I just found that I was craving a more adult writing style, and I still love young adult. I'm not gonna stop reading young adult, or I'm not gonna make any effort necessarily to read more adult. I just think that's kind of what I'm leaning toward, at least for the beginning part of the year for sure. Still gonna read a lot of young adult. So I'm gonna go through the specific diversity things that I was like grading books, not grading, but just notating if books had this like representation. And it's actually kind of funny. Sajid the other day, Books Are My Social Life, he posted an awesome video about diversity versus representation. Like, what do we mean when we say this? And I feel like I throw out, oh, there's this or that rep in this book quite a bit. But like I have on my spreadsheet, like for LGBT plus, I have yes, no, or ish. If it is only side characters that have this representation, or maybe it's only like alluded to, but it's never really delved into all that much, I will put ish. Or if it's not like stated on the page and I just think like I'm pretty sure that's what this character is or is about or whatever, that's who they are, I will put ish. If it is blatantly on the page, the main characters, then I'll say yes. And then of course, if it's just not on the page at all and there's no allusions to it, then I will say no. But that, it gets very muddied, you know what I mean? And because who am I to determine what is representation versus diversity, particularly when it's something that I don't identify as? You know, for POC rep, who am I to be like, that qualifies as yes for being actual representation? That's not up for me to decide, I don't think. And like I said, it can get kind of muddy anyways, because sometimes authors don't explicitly say it. And I don't think that they have to all the time. I don't think books have to always be like, there are brown people here. It shouldn't be like the novelty or tokenism, you know what I mean? They should just be in the book. But of course, if you're only describing the skin color of the black or brown characters, you know, I have thoughts. But anyway, so for this year, I did do more specifics for like diversity, but I don't think I'm going to do that moving forward. And I was thinking about this, and then Ola, my dear friend, she posted a video talking about this, and you know, very well thought out. I'll link that. Pop it above, or not, I can't pop it above. I'll link it down below. Jesus Christ. But she was basically saying that like, you know, who am I to determine if this is yes or no for representation? So I'll go through it for what I did pick for these books this year, but then I'll just compare, because in 2018, I just did if there was any diversity in the book, yes, no, or ish. And I didn't like break it down per like diversity category. And I'm gonna go back to doing that. So for LGBT plus representation, here we are. Primarily no, 54%, but then yes was 30, and that, like I said, is like definitely there is LGBT diversity representation on the page. And then ish, 15.2%, that's where it's a little like, I don't know. Mental health rep, this one is difficult. My God, there's not a ton of mental health rep in fantasy books. I know there are plenty of contemporaries with mental health rep, and that's awesome. I love that. I don't read contemporaries all that much though, so I don't see a lot of it in fantasy. And I feel like there's a lot of fantasy where I'm like, I mean, these characters are portraying symptoms or whatever of maybe PTSD or this or that, but it's not really representation because they're not talking about it in the book. So ish is pretty high for this, 22.7, and that's those types of situations where I'm like, this character, to me, it pretty clearly has some anxiety or depression or PTSD, but it's not like explicitly stated, and I'm not a doctor to diagnose these fictional characters. So I'm gonna go with ish because like, I think so, but it doesn't really count as representation because you're not talking about it. Like I said, I just think that is a pretty clear representation of what's going on in fantasy books. But if you know of fantasy books where that's talked about more like explicitly on the page, definitely pop those links down below because I'd be interested to check them out. And then for POC rep, this one was higher this year than last year, I'm pretty sure. Again, I didn't track this specifically last year, but just from what I recall, and it was 48% yes, my eyes are bad. 37% no, and then about 15%-ish. Disability rep is abysmal in fantasy. Again, I'm sure there are plenty of contemporaries that do a good job with this, but fantasy, not so effing much. 75.6% no, 15.4% ish, and then only 9% yes. And a lot of times in fantasy too, and that's why there's like some ish for this, is where you might have a character with some sort of disability, but they don't really talk about it. And not that they have to talk about it, not that it has to be like a thing, but I don't necessarily count that as representation, I guess, if that concept, like what they deal with, how it makes their life different, how it makes their life more difficult or easier or what have you, or the emotional implications of it. If none of that is gone into at all, I kind of count that as like ish representation. You know what I mean? So just rounding out to diverse books instead of breaking it down like that, we can see that in 2019, I had quite a few, which is great. 66.7%, and compared to last year, I only had 37.6% yes. So definitely a lot more there, which is cool. It's something that like I keep in the back of my mind, but I'm not necessarily just picking books for that reason or anything. But I just try to keep an eye out for books that are in genres that I like, that sound cool, that happen to be diverse. Because I think, especially in fantasy, like I said, it's getting a lot better recently with POC representation, which is really cool. But as you saw, disability rep, mental health rep really aren't great. LGBT rep is getting a lot better also. So that's really cool, but always room for improvement, right? So for the format of books, this year I read quite a few of my owned books, as we can see here. That was definitely the majority at 55.4%. Physical library books at 26%, and I think that was probably higher last year, but again, I've told you guys many times, this year I was making an effort to read through books I actually own, and I mean, I got through quite a few, but I still have a fair amount. And of course, I bought some more books this year. But I tried to mostly buy books that I like already know I'm gonna like or have already read. Ebook 8.7 and audiobooks 9.8. Not a crap ton of that. And there we have it. I feel like I don't do as many as like a lot of people do. But yeah, those are the stats that I pay attention to. And like I said, moving forward, I'm gonna take out the more specific diversity topics, or what am I trying to say, categories, and just do diverse again. Just trying to read more diverse books, whatever that means. As always, thank you so much for your time. Hope you guys have a wonderful day, and I will talk to you later. Bye-bye.